Hello, and welcome to this session of Managing Your Child's Behavior. My name is Phyllis Barrington, and I am a specialist for Fiddlers, stands for Florida Diagnostic Learning Resources Systems. We provide professional development trainings for teachers and parents in Duval, Clay, and Nassau counties. Let's get started on our session. I will share my screen so that we can begin. So, our agenda for this afternoon will be the ABCs of behavior. What is a trigger? Effective consequences, we want to talk about those. Timeouts, how to use them effectively. Staying calm, lashing out, and responding to tantrums. When managing behavior, one of the biggest challenges parents face is managing difficult or defiant behavior on the part of children. Whether they're refusing to put on their shoes or throwing full-blown tantrums, you can find yourself at a loss for an effective way to respond. And as a parent, we know we have always been in a situation where this can occur. So, understanding those chronic behavior patterns with our kids, we have to think about those ABCs. And the ABCs is what happens before the behavior occurs. That's the antecedent. The B is what is the behavior. And the C is what happens after the behavior occurs. So we have to look at each one of these events differently when we're looking at that behavior. We have to be able to understand the ABCs of behavior. So before a behavior occurs, we're looking at the factors that make a behavior more or less likely to occur. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at those triggers. Those triggers are something that we have to learn and anticipating what those triggers could be. That it can be very effective in helping us preventing those misbehaviors. That is our antecedent. When we're looking at the behaviors, which is the B, these are specific actions that you're trying to encourage or discourage from the child. The yelling, the hitting, the arguing, possibly crying and throwing stuff, refusing to comply. We want to make sure that we are looking at specific actions. Then there are the consequences. The consequences are the results, things that naturally occur or what naturally or logically follows the behavior. They can either be positive or negative, and it affects the likelihood of that behavior occurring again. The more immediate the consequence, the more powerful it is. So, immediately following the behavior, there should be a consequence. It could be positive or negative, but we have to make sure that it's happening immediately after the behavior occurs. So, what triggers the behavior? What happens immediately before the behavior? We have to look at what is going on prior to that behavior happening and what triggers the behavior. You have to be specific about what's going on. You're going to look at the activity, the demands, or the task. What are those things that are we asking from that child that may be a trigger? And it has to be very specific in order for that behavior to surface. We want to look at those triggers specifically. So when we're looking at triggers to avoid, assuming expectations are understood. When you're saying that you're assuming that they're understood, you don't want to assume that the child knows what's expected of them. You have to spell it out for them. Be very specific. When children are unsure of what they are supposed to be doing, they're more likely to misbehave. Be very clear and concise in your expectations. Calling things out from a distance. Tell children important instructions face to face. They need to see it coming directly from you. They need to hear it coming out of your mouth. Things yelled from a distance are less likely to be remembered and understood. When you're in one room and the child is in another and you're telling them, I need you to clean your room, it's not going to happen when you want it to happen. You're calling it out from a distance. They need to see it face to face in order to know that immediate action needs to occur now. Transitioning without warning. For little kids, transitions can be hard. For some of our middle schoolers and high schoolers, we just have to keep reminding them, even the little ones, we just want to make sure that we remind them of when it's time to move on, especially in the middle of something that they may be enjoying. Having warnings gives children the chance to find a good stopping place for an activity and makes the transition less fraught. It makes them not as anxious about transitioning. They already know it's going to happen. So they're anticipating the transition happening. So you have to kind of prepare them. It's a warning, it's a preparation. It's just like living in Florida and we look at the news and we see that a hurricane is coming. We have to prepare for it. And that's the same thing when we're transitioning for our students or our kids. They have to be able to transition, but we're warning them that a transition is about to occur. The last one is asking rapid fire questions or giving a series of instructions. Now, as adults, you could give people rapid fire questions and series of instructions, and you can sit there and kind of contemplate what's going to happen next, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? When they're kids, they may need these instructions delivered in a series of questions or instructions with limits. You may have to only give them a portion of what you want them to do at the very least. And it's the likelihood that they will hear you. They'll ask questions and answer some of the questions that you may ask them. They'll remember the task more easily and do what has been instructed of them. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention to how we're giving asking those questions or giving a series of instructions to those kids. When we're looking at triggers to embrace, here are just some that we can help support good behavior. Good behavior. Be aware of the situation. By being aware of a situation, we know our kids. We know our children. You know when your child is hungry, when they're tired, sometimes when they're anxious, and when they're distracted. So these things, be aware of situations like those that can make it much more difficult for a child to bring back that behavior, rein in that behavior. We want the behavior not to occur. So if they're hungry, they may act out more. If they're tired, when children are tired and they're anxious, they're going to act out a little bit. And distractions can also cause you to act out sometimes. The next one that we kind of want to make sure we embrace is to adjust the environment. When we adjust the environment, it's when it's homework time, for instance, let's try to remove some of the distractions like video screens and toys. Establish an organized place for kids to work and make sure to schedule some breaks. Remember, attention is not infinite. It's not going to stay that way the entire time. So we want to make sure that we adjust the environment. Have a dedicated workspace in the house specifically for homework, or a place where they need that quiet time, a space in the house dedicated just for them when they need to have some me time, that downtime. Again, making expectations clear. You'll be better if both of you and your child are clear on what is expected. Sit down with them and present the information verbally. Sometimes you do need to sit down for understanding, just so that you have total, um, you're getting their total attention at that time. You want to give them that information verbally. Even if he or she should know what is expected, go over those expectations at the start of the task, and it helps head off any misunderstandings down the way. We want to make sure that we are being very clear about what is expected of them. Providing countdowns for transitions. These are the things we want to put in place. Whenever possible, prepare your child for an upcoming transition. Let them know where they are. Say you have 10 minutes remaining before you must come to dinner, or you have 10 minutes left outside to play. I'm coming to get you in 10 minutes. Say your goodbyes. Then remind them when when it may be like 2 minutes left. Just as important as issuing a countdown is making the transition at the started time. So if you gave them 10 minutes, you have to be consistent and hold tight and firm to that 10 minutes. Make it 10, don't make it 15. And finally, let's give kids a choice. As kids grow up, it's important that they have a say in their scheduling. Given a structured choice, do you want to take a shower after dinner or before dinner? You want to give them an option. I'm not saying you letting them have their way, because at the end of the day, they're still going to have to take a shower. But do they want to take it before dinner, or do you want them to take it after dinner? They still are taking the shower, but you've given them the option before or after. So, what is the response to that behavior? We have to look at what happens immediately following that behavior. What is it getting that child? Is it getting them what they want? Is it getting them their attention? How are you, as the adult, responding to that behavior? Are you letting it slide? Are you giving that child what they want because you're just exhausted of dealing with that behavior? What are the consequences for the child? Do they know that if I do this enough, I'm going to get what I want? What is the child gaining as a result of engaging in that behavior? Again, it's back to that consequence. Do they know that if I do this, then that? And how is it paying off for him or her? What are they learning from this? These are some of the things that you have to think about. Remember, not all consequences are created equal. Some are an excellent way to create structure, and it helps our kids understand the difference between acceptable behaviors and unacceptable behaviors, while others have the potential to do more harm than good. So we want to make sure that we are training our kids up in the way in which these behaviors will be accepted by society. As a parent, having a strong understanding of how to intelligently and consistently use consequences can make all the difference. So when it comes to effective consequences, we look at positive attention for positive behaviors. And I want you to think about this. Consequences that are more effective begin with generous attention to the behaviors you want to see. These are the ones that you want to encourage. When we're looking at positive attention for positive behaviors, giving your child positive reinforcement for being good helps maintain the ongoing good behavior. Positive attention enhances the quality of the relationship. It improves the child's self esteem and feels good for everyone involved. It can also help reduce the anxiety and help the child become more receptive to instructions and limit settings. Ignoring actively. This should be used only with minor misbehaviors. When it's not to be used when there's aggression and when they're showing or exhibiting very destructive behavior. Actively ignoring involves the deliberate withdrawal of your attention when a child starts to misbehave. As you ignore, you wait for positive behavior to resume. They stop falling out on the floor. So now you've walked away, you've ignored the behavior. They got up and they're walking with you, and you acknowledge that good behavior. Now they've stopped that misbehavior that you didn't want to see. You want to give positive attention as soon as that desired behavior starts. By withholding your attention until you get that positive behavior you want to see or that you are trying to teach your child, what behavior gets you to engage? They need to understand falling out on the floor does not get mommy's attention or doesn't get daddy's attention. They have to understand that mom's going to walk away when I'm acting like this. But as soon as I get up and walk next to her, she acknowledges me. This is what they need to see. Reward menus. Rewards are a tangible way to give children positive feedback for desired behaviors. And as parents, we love to reward our kids, but we need to reward those good behaviors. A reward is something a child earns. It's acknowledgement that he or she is doing something that's difficult. We want to reward them when they've sat down at a dinner and they may have been the only child there with all the adults, and they acted in a good way. And we want to make sure that we reward them for that. Rewards are most effective as motivators when the child can choose from a variety of things. Again, providing choices. We want to continue to provide our children with choices. I'm not saying you're giving them carte blanche to do what they want to do, but you're giving them an option. Extra time on the iPad, sometimes a special treat. Those types of things go a long way. This will reduce the possibility of a reward losing its appeal over time. So you give them these things sparingly. Rewards should be linked to specific behaviors and always delivered consistently. And that's something as a parent, I know I have to be conscious of, is to be consistent in some of the things that I do. And you as parents have to be consistent. Reward those behaviors when you see them doing what it is that you want them to do. When it comes to timeouts are one of the most effective consequences parents can use, but also one of the hardest to do correctly. Because we hate to see ourselves punish our kids, and it's almost like a punishment for us. It's more of a punishment for the parents than it is for the kids, because the kids are sad and you're not using it effectively. Because if you say you're going to be in timeout for 5 minutes and you only give them 2 because you're seeing the sad face, or they're in the room for 5 minutes and they're supposed to be in there for 30 minutes, it's not effective. And it's the hardest thing for us as parents to do. So we're going to talk about timeouts. When we do timeouts, we want to make sure that we be clear, be consistent, set rules and follow them, and return to the task. When we're talking about being clear, establish which behaviors will result in timeouts. We have to establish what behaviors a child exhibits, and they need to understand that these behaviors will garner you a timeout. You're going to get a timeout when this happens. When a child exhibits that behavior, make sure the corresponding timeout is relatively brief and immediately follows that behavior, that negative behavior that we don't want to see. We want to be consistent. And by being consistent, randomly administering timeouts when you're feeling frustrated undermines the system. And it makes it harder for the child to connect behaviors with consequences. And sometimes, as parents, you've had a full day, and to come home to a misbehaving child and then to put them in timeout for something that it has not been established as timeout behavior, you're not being clear. So that goes back to our step one. You have to be clear about those behaviors that we're going to use for timeout. And this is where the consistency comes in. Be consistent about those behaviors that we have outlined to be timeouts. Be consistent when we are administering timeouts. Then we want to make sure that you set rules and follow them. During a timeout, there should be no talking to the child. I'm going to repeat that. There should be no talking to the child until you are ending the timeout. Once the timeout is over, timeout should only end once the child has been calm and quiet briefly, so they learn to associate the end of timeout with the desired behavior. This is what I want to see. So the timeout is over. You're acting the way I need you to act. So let's sit down and let's talk about it. Finally, we're going to return to the task that brought us to the timeout. So if timeout was issued for not complying with the task, once it ends, the child should be instructed to complete the original task. So we're back to step one, where we're being clear about what it is our expectations are. This way, the child won't begin to see timeouts as an escape strategy. You still have to complete the task that I asked you to complete. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're using these timeouts effectively. Understanding behavior. If children are repeatedly engaging in a behavior, they are most likely doing it for a reason, because it is paying off for them. It's getting them something that they want. Mom, dad, you're tired of seeing the same behavior. So each time you trigger it, they act out, the behavior occurs, the consequence will be whatever that is that you've been doing for them. And they're going to keep doing that same behavior over and over again. I need for everyone to understand that behavior is communication. This is how when they can't speak it or tell you exactly what it is, this is the way they're going to communicate it. They're going to communicate it with their behavior. We as adults communicate our behavior. Sometimes we tend to we give people the silent treatment. That's our way of communicating. And guess what? It's ineffective communication. Just like children acting out and going through these behavioral changes, this is their way of communicating. Children learn that their behavior is the best way for them to get their needs met. So if they're going to keep doing this and keep receiving the same consequence of getting out of the task they didn't want to do, they're going to keep that cycle going on and on and on. It's a vicious cycle, and someone has to end it. So now that you understand the behavior, you're going to have to learn how to stay calm in the midst of chaos. Okay? And it's very hard as a parent when you've had to deal with people at work all day. You're dealing with the traffic. You're trying to get home. You had to go to the grocery store. Someone pushed a buggy on the back of your heel. Now you're trying to get out to the car. You drop something. Oh my goodness, your day is not going the best. And now you have to go pick the children up. Now you go home. You have to start dinner. It's chaotic. You want to get everyone set up for homework in the designated homework area. And parents know that When there's chaos, how do you stay calm and not yell is a golden rule. But unless you're made of stone, you're not going to be able to maintain a measured tone when you're dealing with children day in and day out. You send your kids to school during the day, but guess what? You get them up in the morning and they come back home in the evening. And they're yours until the next day you send them to school the next day. And you have them all weekend. So when parents yell, they've lost it, they're overwhelmed with anger or frustration, it's understandable. But you have got to learn how to stay calm when there is chaos going on. What's wrong with yelling? They begin to up the ante. You begin losing the message. Um, when you are yelling, you're getting agitated, the student is getting agitated. And it's a vicious cycle. Again, it's going on and on and on. They've heard it all before. How much more yelling can you do with a child? You've yelled yesterday, you're yelling again today, you're yelling tomorrow. It's just going on and on. And they've heard it all before and they've become numb to it. Think about how you become numb to some of the bad behaviors that you've had to deal with. It becomes hard on a student's self-esteem. And we know this, that it does. It becomes hard on their self-esteem after they have been yelled at so much. Next, missing out on the positive. When you're yelling, you never get to see all the good stuff that they're doing. You're missing out on the positive things that they've done because you're so busy yelling about what was done wrong. And at the end of the day, you start to feel wrong. You start to feel bad because you yelled at a child for something that someone else may have done. You feel bad. And at that point, that's when you, as the adult, have to be the bigger person and you should go back and apologize. Let that child know, dad is sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. It just makes it feel, you will feel better and the child will feel better. So, why is calmer better? You want to make sure when addressing inappropriate behavior, calmly enabling you to focus on teaching the child what's problematic about his behavior and following through with effective consequences, that you begin modeling the behavior. Modeling it and showing them how you react is how they're going to learn how to behave. They'll learn not to yell. They'll learn not to hit because they learn from seeing and they learn because we are exhibiting some of these behaviors. Um, Kids will feel safer. The best style of parenting features a high degree of nurturing, firm but as kind, but you have to be kind. As much as children and teens may act like they want control, what really makes them feel safe is when you are calm, consistent, and fair authority figures. Strategies that help yourself feel calmer, you can help your children learn to regulate better. And it makes life better for both of you. You want to create consistency with younger kids. It helps to create a set routine with simple one-step directions that could include visuals and plenty of praise and rewards. Consider the triggers. Being aware of the context of the behavior allows for calmer responses. So if we recognize when a child is cranky because he missed his snack or is overtired, it can be easier to temper our own frayed feelings. So if you know that your child missed a meal and they're hungry, and we use this word hangry as adults. We get hangry when we're hungry and we're a little angry. Just know that our children can be the same way. Understanding equals patience. It's also important for parents to know and understand their children's capabilities, since this can help them become more patient. Know what your child is capable of. It helps. That's why we say understanding equals patience. Don't give them something that is beyond their scope of understanding. We want to make sure that we're working with our children and their capabilities where they are. So, why is calmer better? Time management. Trying to do too much causes stress. And we know we do this all the time. We live in a fast-paced society. Everything is on a time limit. We as adults, we have to be to work by 8 o'clock. We have to get the kids up and had breakfast at school by such and such a time, and we're always on a schedule. The times I lose it are the times when I'm already overtaxing myself. We don't make time for the things that we know we should make time for. If you know you have to be to work at 8 o'clock, why leave at 7:45? You're already overtaxing yourself. The time to do bills is not when the kids are at the table doing an art project. The time to do bills probably would be the best time when they're doing homework, or maybe when the kids are asleep, because now you can actually spend the time to do what it is you need to do. Um, Parents trying to multitask increases the risk of kids misbehaving, because you can't focus on all of these different things that's going on and pay attention to what the children are doing. Just be there with your kids. Be fully involved with your student or your child at that time. When they're with you, be there. Don't just be a body, but be fully there. That means mind, body, and soul. It's less likely they'll throw their breakfast off the floor because you're sitting there with them. Breathe and count to 10. This works. Take a breath. Take a break. Take a breath. Recognize when you're about to lose control so you can step away from the situation. Sometimes leaving the room when you can do it safely. That helps. A mom who tells her child she's taking a time out is modeling self-calming behavior. Sometimes you do need to step away before you say something or before you do something. Just step away, calm down, count to 10. You're relaxed. Now, let's talk about it. When you feel yourself becoming hot with frustration and hear yourself getting louder and louder, stop. Check yourself. Take a deep breath and start over. Don't do this just with the children, do this with other adults as well. So this is a very good technique that you can use not only with the kids, but use it with your coworkers, use it with the people on the road when they are road raging. Take a breath, count to 10, start over. It makes your life easier. So why is calmer better? You disengage, you'll learn because you're calm, you're thinking clearly. You'll seek a better solution, and you'll own up to if you've done something possibly wrong. Um, when we talk about disengage, you actively ignore the problem behaviors, and another strategy that helps stop parents from yelling. If you disengage from the situation until you regain your composure, you won't be feeding the fire. This cannot be done when a child is being aggressive or destructive. Instead, by responding positively to one to only desired behaviors, parents reinforce what they want versus what they don't want. By allowing kids to practice slowing their engines down on their own without parental prompts, they're learning how to handle frustration. So when they disengage, they're learning how to slow down their engines. They're learning how to say, okay, I need to stop for a minute. With the learning part, they learn to let go and when to laugh it off. Along with ignoring comes learning to loosen up. And sometimes we as adults need to learn how to do these things. Learn to let go and when to laugh it off. If the snack ends up on the floor, instead of getting mad at the child, say, "Oh no, you made a mess. Let's clean it up together." Or do what you have to do to make it easier for yourself. Let's not get angry. It happens. Mistakes happen. We've all dropped something on the floor. We've all made a mess at one point or another. But there's no sense in getting upset about it. Just learn how to be calm and let's think of a solution. And that goes into seek. Seek support. Have a safety net of friends and relatives for those extremely bad days when you don't feel you can calm yourself down and need to call for reinforcements. It happens to all of us. We've all been there where we had those notoriously bad days. It's like one bad thing after another. And now you have to go home to the yelling kids, the spouse who's waiting for you to do this or said that you didn't do that. Um, Somebody cut you off on the way home. You had to slam on brakes. It's just always something. So you may need to seek that safety net of friends. Sometimes they say support groups, other parents, and clinicians can all help by assuring parents they aren't alone. You're not alone. Just know that today was your day and tomorrow will be somebody else's day. This does not happen. It's not, you're not in a silo. It's not just you by yourself. That's why they always say it takes a village. It does take a village. And you have to make sure that you're seeking that support system that you have in place when you feel that you need that day, those extremely bad days. Finally, own up to your feelings. Depending on the age and developmental level of the child, parents may, after things have calmed down, model for their kids how to talk about their feelings. This is growth. Imagine showing your child this from the age of 5, and then you see some more growth at 7. By the time they're 13, when they could be little terrors at 13, because they're at that age, at least they're able to talk to you better. Say, "I'm sorry I lost my temper. That was kind of rough, and I shouldn't have yelled at you." So these are just some of the examples. But do you understand why I get a little frustrated, Mom? And then have a brief conversation about the situation. Even when I lose my temper, I still love you. Sometimes you have to tell your kids that. I used to tell my daughter this all the time, especially in middle school. It's something about that middle school age where they tend to push your buttons a little more. And you constantly have to remind yourself it's the age. They're trying to find themselves. So I have to disengage. I had to learn. Sometimes I did have to seek support, and I would have to drop her off at maybe her grandmother's house or at an aunt's house or somewhere, just for give me 30 minutes, give me an hour. Let me go walk around the mall for a minute to calm myself down. Let me go exercise at the gym, something. And come back and have a conversation with her and explain to her what was going on with me and why I did what I did and what she said that triggered that reaction. The point is to try to keep the eruptions from undermining their trust and security in you as an adult. You don't want to break that relationship. And that's the very thing we don't want to do. We want to make sure we maintain that relationship and strengthen that relationship as they get older. They want you and love on you when they're 3, 5, 7. By the time they're 10, 13, don't touch me. Again, by the time they're 16, 17, 18, they love you all over again. So it's like a phase that they go through, and we have to be able to learn how to navigate through those phases as adults. So present the information for compliance. When we do that, we must be direct. Make statements rather than asking questions. Be very direct. Please sit down, as opposed to, are you ready to get out of your homework? Let's go ahead and have a seat so we can do your homework. No, please sit down, let's do your homework. Be very direct about what it is you're expecting them to do. Be close. Give instructions when you are near the child rather than calling out from across the room. We talked about that one earlier. Being in another room doesn't make it as effective as sitting there eye to eye. Use clear and specific commands. Instead of go ahead, say, please go start your reading assignment. Use clear and specific commands. Again, being direct, being close, and using clear and specific commands. All of these things require you to be right there. And that means be fully there. Give age appropriate instructions. Speak to your child at their level that they will understand. If your child is younger, keep things simple and use words you know he or she knows. Please pick up the ball. With older children who are so often keenly aware of not being babies anymore, it's important to be clear without being patronizing. You want to make sure that you are very clear and not sounding as though you're patronizing them. Give instructions one at a time, especially for kids who have attention challenges. You know if your child has some attention issues going on. So if they have those, avoid giving a series of instructions. Maybe one or two at the most, and come back with follow-ups. Please put on your sneakers and get your lunch off the kitchen counter. That's enough. Once they do that, they'll probably come right back to you. Okay, mom, what's next? And meet me in the front hall. We're getting ready to walk out the door. Put the shoes on and getting the lunch was enough. Keep explanations simple. Given a rationale can increase the likelihood children will listen to a command, but not if the command gets lost in it. Go get your coat because it's raining and I don't want you to catch a cold. Because they're going to always ask you why. Why do I need to get a coat? I don't want you to catch a cold. Just go ahead and just give them the explanation. Keep it simple. Instead, try, it's raining and I don't want you to catch a cold. Go get your coat on. And give kids time to process. We have to do this for ourselves, even when we're speaking to each other as adults. You have to give everybody time to process what was being said. After you give an instruction, wait a few seconds without repeating what you said. Children then learn to listen to calm instructions given once rather than learning that they don't need to listen because the instructions will be repeated. If they know that you're going to repeat it 2, 3, 5 times, and then each time you repeat it, you get louder, they're just watching and waiting. They're just waiting to see what you're going to do next. So we want to make sure as adults that we keep from doing what we've requested our kids not to do. How to respond when a child lashes out. When a child, even a small child, melts down and becomes aggressive, they can pose a serious risk not only to himself but others, including the parents and the siblings. So what you want to do, it's not uncommon for kids who have trouble handling their emotion to lose control and direct their distress at a caregiver, screaming and cursing, throwing dangerous objects, or hitting. It can be a scary, stressful experience for you and your child too. Children often feel sorry after they've worn themselves out and calmed down. Understand that behavior is communication. Again, they couldn't express themselves verbally, so they use their behavior to communicate with you. A child who is overwhelmed that he is lashing out is a distressed child. He doesn't have the skill to manage his feelings and express them in a more mature way. He may lack he may not have the language skills or impulse control or problem solving abilities to express it. Sometimes parents see this kind of behavior as manipulative, but as a child who lashes out, they usually are unable to handle their frustration or anger in a more effective way. By talking and trying to figure out how to achieve what they want, this is what they need to learn. So, behavior is communication. As a child, a child is overwhelmed that he or she is lashing out, is distressed, and they don't have those skills to manage their feelings. They lack the language and the impulse control again, and those problem solving abilities. So we have to remember what type of behavior this is. Behavior is the communication. Okay. So how to respond when a child lashes out. We want to make sure that we as adults stay calm. By staying calm, you're faced with a raging child. It's easy to feel out of control and find yourself yelling. But when you shout, you're only making him more aggressive and more defiant. Stay calm and in control of your own emotions. You can be a model for your child. You have to stay calm because we want to model the behavior that they need to do. Um, don't give in. Don't encourage him to continue this behavior by agreeing to what he or she wants in order to make it stop. You can't give in because this is what they want, because they'll continue to do this behavior. Again, it'll be a repeat performance later on. We want to make sure that we praise the appropriate behavior. When he has calmed down, praise him for pulling himself together. Let's praise that appropriate behavior. Help him or her practice their problem solving skills. These problem solving skills are going to go a long way. When your child is upset, is the time to help them try to communicate their feelings and coming up with solutions to conflicts before they escalate into aggressive outbursts. So help them understand what are the steps to problem solving. Timeouts and reward systems. Timeouts are for nonviolent misbehavior and can work well with children younger than 7 or 8 years old. If a child is too old for timeouts, you may want to move to a system that's more geared towards positive reinforcement for appropriate behavior, points or tokens towards something he or she wants. And when we're talking about our older students, we have to look at what their interests are and what it is that um, they tend to like. We want to look at those things and talk to them about that type of reward. But we don't want to overuse it, because then it doesn't become a reward. It becomes something that it kind of falls on deaf ears, because if the behavior continues, they know what to do in order to get what they want. And finally, avoiding those triggers. Kids who have frequent meltdowns do it at a very predictable time. They usually do it when it's homework time, bedtime, or when it's time to stop playing. Um, the trigger is usually being asked to do something they don't want to do, something that they don't like, or to stop doing something that they do like. That's the reason why we have time warnings, breaking tasks down into small one-step directions, and preparing the child for situations and call all help. We want to try to avoid those meltdowns. That's the purpose of avoiding those triggers. So when we're responding to tantrums, If your child is doing a lot of lashing out, enough that it is frequently frightening you and disrupting your family, it is important for you to get some type of professional help at this point. Tantrums and meltdowns are especially concerning when they occur more often, more intensely, or past the age in which they are developmentally expected. I would not expect to see a child that's maybe 8, 9, 10 years old having a tantrum or a meltdown. Those terrible twos up through preschool. That's the time when I expect to see that. Um, as a child gets older, aggression becomes more and more dangerous to not only you and the child, but anyone else that may be around. And it can become a big problem for him or her at school with their friends as well. So, thank you for attending Managing Your Child's Behavior.